All right, we're live. Happy Saturday, everyone. This week we got the Quaker State 400, Kentucky Speedway. A little bit of a weird weekend, like I mentioned in the Road Post preview video. We're live. Shut that down here. Sorry about that. So yeah, it was an impound race. So practice and qualifying was yesterday, but that was an unofficial lineup. We've got the official lineup now after inspection is over. I'm going to share my cheat sheet here in a minute. We're going to kind of go through that, look at some things. I'm going to answer questions using the cheat sheet, some of the stats and stuff that are on there. Looking at the track, yeah, they made some, it goes back to 2011 is when they made the first runs here in the Cup Series. In 2015, they did some configurations. The two ends of the track are a little bit different, where we've got now 17 degrees in turns 1 and 2, and then we've got 14 degrees in turns 3 and 4. They've also put PJ1 down. It's just like a sticky compound. You're going to see it if you're watching the race or if you're watching qualifying or anything like that. Just what they're trying to do is just create more friction, and via Bob Pockers, they're trying to get like a 15% more traction, more friction than the spots that weren't treated by this PJ1. What they're trying to do is just create a separate racing line so it's a lot easier to pass, so that you can have drivers, too wide trying to pass each other. Because this race has been, I'm actually just going to turn over the cheat sheet now. Lucky you, you don't got to look at me anymore. We'll switch that over. I'll just show you what I mean here, why they're trying to do this. Okay, we've got the cheat sheet on the screen now. So we're going to go back and look at the previous races here. I'm actually just going to go right in, because I only look at the last 6 races on my cheat sheet. So I'm just going to go right to Racing Reference here, and I'm going to show you at this track. The winners come from the pole 3 times. It's come from the front row 5 times and 3 straight. And they actually, since those configurations in the configurations were 2015, early 2016. So there's been 3 races with the new configuration now. They've all come from the first 2 rows, Kozlowski, Truex, and Truex. Truex also, in those 2 races that he won all 3 stages in both races. So he absolutely dominated both of those races. So it's been a track where starting up front has been very important. So what they're trying to do with this PJ1 is just make it so that there's more than one lane, so that guys aren't just hugging the bottom on turns 1 and 2. They're trying to get them a little bit higher up in those corners, and then kind of the same thing with 3 and 4, just so there's more passing, more excitement out there, so it isn't quite what we've seen in the past. Is it going to work? Who knows? They did some testing, and they put more PJ1 down this morning, actually, so I don't think they're totally confident that it's completely going to work, being that they had to lay down more after the Xfinity race last night. What I see in the Xfinity race, though, all the different cars, different packages and stuff, was there was some passing opportunities. There were guys going in too wide into turns 1 and 2. So it's dependent, but until I see it change, I just don't really. I'm going to kind of go off of what I've seen in the past. Now, in the past, looking at Kentucky, and then we're also going to look at some very important stuff here I've added to the cheat sheet. If you didn't watch the Road Pros video or you haven't checked out the cheat sheet yet, I've got 2019 rules package on 1.5 mile tracks. So every 1.5 mile track so far this season, except for Atlanta, has used this 2019 rules package, which is the air ducts on the front. We've got the low downforce with the rear spoiler. We've got the tapered spacer, 550 horsepower. So these are the races of the 1.5 tracks that have used it. Pocono, Michigan have also used it as well, and Fontana. So you can reference those as well, but those are different styles of tracks. I wanted to keep it just to the 1.5 mile intermediates. So I've got wins, top 5s, top 10. So as you can see, Brad Keselowski, Joey Logano are the only 2 drivers to have top 5s in at least 3 top 5s in those 5 races. So definitely got to have them on your radar. And then you factor in that Keselowski's won here 3 times in 8 races. He's definitely got to be one of your favorites. Something else. So you've got average finish here. We've got FanDuel points. We've got DraftKings points. We've got number of laps led at each of those tracks at each of those races. And what I can the conclusion that I was drawing from this is that teams, seeing that there was none leading 100 laps at Vegas or Texas, and all of a sudden Kansas, Charlotte, like I said, it's 100 miles longer, so there's more laps. So I wasn't surprised to see 100 plus there, but then again, we've seen it at Chicago. So it just feels like teams have really figured that out, and that kind of factors into this race again, where we talk about where starting up front is very important to finishing well. So I think we see a dominator lead 100 plus laps. My dominator right now He was #1 in my model before. He's #1 in my model now. Is Kevin Harvick. He hasn't won here yet, but he's been very consistent here. Top 10s. I think he has first fifth place finish last year. Looking at practice is what really draws me in, especially that he's cheaper than Busch and Truex here. Is he was eighth in first practice, 9th in 10 lap averages, 2nd in final practice, 3rd in 10 lap averages. So he's got a good short run car in final practice. He improved the car from practice 1 to practice 2, and he looks like he's got a good long run car as well. And going back and looking at this intermediate tracks with the 2019 rules package information, he's got the 5th best average finish at 9.8. He hasn't finished worse than 14th, but what really stands out is not really so much that information, because, I mean, he doesn't have a win. He's only got 1 top 5 in those 5 races. It's the Dominator points. He led 88 laps at Vegas, 104 at Kansas, and 132 at Chicago for 338. So you can see Alex Bowman's 2nd in those 5 races at 159. He's also had 171 fast laps in there as well. So he's been very good at getting out front and leading laps. So I think from the 5th starting position, he's a driver that can get out front within 5-10 laps of the race, and possibly, you know, lead the whole entire first stage or most of it. And then I think if he can put together a full race, finally get his first win of the season, his first win here in Kentucky, and be the Dominator on DraftKings or FanDuel, both of them this week. So he's definitely my #1 driver. I agree 100% with my model this week. #2 in the model, I've got Martin Truex Jr. He didn't have a 10 lap average posted, so he didn't run 10 consecutive laps at either practice. He was 18th and 20th, hasn't shown a ton of speed. So kind of might drive some of the public people off of him. I think he's a good GPP play. Obviously, you can't, you know, it's going to be tough to fit 2 of the top 3 in together. I like it a little bit better on FanDuel just because Harvick's a little bit cheaper, and some of the punt plays definitely come in a little bit better value on FanDuel as well. But he hasn't shown practice, so I think Truex is going to be definitely leaning on his teammates because, I mean, Kyle Busch, he was 2nd in 10 lap averages in final practice, 5th. So he's got top 10, top 5 speed in short run, and then that long run speed he showed in final practice. And then you've got Denny Hamlin, same thing. He was 5th in 10 lap averages, 3rd in 1 lap average, and he was also 1st in 10 lap averages in first practice. Eric Jones looks like he's got about a top 10 car here as well, 7th in second practice, 10 lap averages there as well. He started in 21st, so I really like the Toyotas in this race. I think you can. I don't necessarily think you need to stack kind of like a Daytona at all. It's completely different strategies there. But going with a couple teammates, strong cars, you know, that are showing, it's definitely worked out at these tracks. Like I said, Keselowski and Logano have been very good with 3 top 5s each in those races. So moving on, the other lap leaders, as you can see, we've only got 6 drivers who've led over 100 laps in those races. I'd like to see that Kyle Busch has got 170 fast laps. I look at it like a little bit of a regression, maybe, that, you know, he's got all those fast laps. He's probably going to see more laps led in the future type thing. Looks like it correlates closely to that. So you got that in there. You got Alex Bowman, Chase Elliott, 2 of the top 5. That's something else that stands out when you start looking at the results in general for these mile-and-a-half tracks with the 2019 package. Is Johnson, Elliott, Bowman. They make up 3 of the top 4 when you're looking at average finish. Jimmy Johnson comes in with 4 straight top 10s. 2 of those are top 5s at Texas and Chicago. He's the only driver with 4 top 10s in those 5 races. So I'll definitely be looking at the Chevys this week. We go look at the cheat sheet. We've got Elliott starting 20th. Love that. Both sites, especially on DraftKings with the place differential. He was 6th in final practice. He didn't really show that long run speed in final practice, and it's kind of the opposite for first practice. He showed, you know, he was 14th in 1 lap speed, but then he was 4th in 10 lap averages. So kind of just taking the average of that, I think his floor is probably, you know, 10th to 12th place car, and his upside, I think he's got winning upside here as well. So definitely makes sense under 10K building around him. And I think he'll be a little bit less owned, especially with Keselowski ready to bump him for only $300 more. Right, yeah, I probably should have touched on that at the start. So we went through inspection. I kind of jumped the gun a little bit. So only 2 drivers missed inspection. Nothing too serious this week. It was pretty uneventful. I think Those two, first of all, it was Ryan Newman. He was at 23rd, so he'll go back to 35th, and then Quinn Houff as well. He went back a few spots. So Houff will go to the back just because he is lower in the points than Newman, so Newman starts 35th. Going to be super chalky. Not much more to say there. He hasn't shown a ton of speed. He hasn't been great here lately. He's been pretty good in the past. But just starting 35th, I think that's just an auto lock for cash if you're playing cash games on DraftKings. I think he's high enough, going to be high enough owned on DraftKings where you can be underweight or completely fade him if you want and go to Jimmy Johnson. I think that's going to lower. I love that for lowering Jimmy Johnson's ownership at only $200 more. I think that lowers Suarez a little bit. Suarez is starting on the pole. I like it a lot more in FanDuel because if he goes back and say he finishes 10th, 11th, that's a lot less damaging to your overall score on FanDuel, where place differential isn't quite as important as it is on DraftKings. If you think he's going to lead, I talked about this in the other video for Roto Pros. If you think he's going to lead 50 or more, 50 or more, 40 or more laps, I think at that price it makes sense to get him into your lineups on DraftKings. But if you don't think he's going to lead, if you think someone's going to get out front, I think Harvick's going to make his way up within 5 to 10 laps and pass him. So I'm not really on Suarez besides a few GPP lineups that I'm looking at those drivers on the front row, building around that narrative, I guess you could say, of starting up front. But for the most part, I'm going to be underweight on him on DraftKings just because I don't think he leads more than 10, 12 laps. It's going to be close for him. He's going to need a top 5 finish to hit value, in my opinion. I think if he finishes outside the top 10, you're kind of missing out on other drivers in that area. So I think with that Newman chalk, with him going to the back of the field, that's going to lower the ownership of Johnson for sure. Even Almirola, especially on DraftKings, where he's starting on the front row, but I don't think anyone's really looking at him as a dominator. He's 24th in 10 lap averages and 11th in, no 10 lap average in first practice and 11th in final practice. Not really looking towards him as a dominator, so I think he's going to be super low on if you want to put together a GPP lineup with him. I like him, again, a lot more on FanDuel where that place differential isn't quite as important. And then Houff, I wasn't rostering him to begin with anyway. So anyone that was behind Newman, so at the time before this was updated, anyone from 24th back just moves up one spot. If you're looking at an old cheat sheet, or maybe old qualifying that isn't updated. If you're using my cheat, my cheat sheet, it's fully updated, reflecting all that information now. I've got everything updated the way I want it. So the drivers are on there, and if you're a DFSR or a Roto Pros member, make sure to get in those chats prior to lock here, or anytime after qualifying is over. Pretty much you can get your members only cheat sheet where I highlight all my core plays that are going to be in my player pool each week. I do core plays, secondary plays, but you've seen them last week. If you watched the video last week, I had them on there. So that's now just going to be available through Roto Pros and DFSR. Moving on. Other drivers with place differential I think we need to look at on DraftKings. Kyle Larson definitely started 19th. He was 6th, second in 10 lap averages in first practice. Not as good in final practice, 9th, 13th there. So I think he's definitely going to be GPP only just because of the season he's had. He's been, I don't even want to say up and down. It's been mostly down for him. We'll scroll over, just look at some current form and stuff like that. Over the last 6 races, he's got 1 top 5, 2 top 10s. He's only got 6 top 10s in 18 races for the season. Average finish of 16.8. We know he's got huge upside. He's a very talented driver. He's going to want, especially in 1 and 2, I think he's one of those drivers that's going to be the first ones up there to test that outside in that PJ1 because he's a driver that does like the outside. So if he can get that to work, I think, his floor, barring any wrecks or any unforeseen mechanical issues, stuff like that, I think his floor is around, top 10, 10th to 12th place car type thing. But if he can get that outside to work, I think he's got a ton of upside. Top 5, even winning upside, might see him pick up his first win of the season. And then you got his teammate right below him, which is another reason that gives me confidence. I mean, they're not completely working together, but they do definitely share information. So Kurt Busch was very strong in practice. First in the opening practice, 6th in 10 lap averages, 13th in practice 2, 6th in 10 lap averages, starting 4th. Again, another driver I'm looking to a little bit more on FanDuel. I don't think he's going to be a dominator. So pretty much the way I look at it is if I see a driver starting top 5 on a track like this where we're looking at dominator points, I'm really leaning those drivers more FanDuel than DraftKings. On DraftKings, I think they're going to be lower owned, where I will resort to them a little bit in GPPs, especially Kurt Busch. Kurt Busch over like Almirola and Suarez. Even with the discount, I think Kurt Busch is going to be lower on. I think he makes an excellent GPP. Even him and Larson and Busch. So you get the place differential upside with Larson, and you get just possible dominator. Maybe he leads 20 laps, 25 laps, and maybe both of them get a top 5. Have their best starts there. One of them wins the race. I think it's going to be a very low-owned way to go. It can definitely win you a GPP there. Talked about Chase Elliott and his upside or his place differential. Then you got the Toyotas. You got Denny Hamlin and Eric Jones starting 18th and 21st this week. Hamlin especially stands out for me because of his long run speed that I talked about earlier. He was first in 10 lap averages in first practice, 5th in 10 lap averages in second practice. So definitely like that there. I think he's got a good long run car. So if we don't see, a whole bunch of cautions, whole bunch of wrecks, stuff like that, and we see a lot of green flag runs, I think Hamlin makes his way into the top 10 pretty early, and I think he's got top 5 upside. Jones wasn't as good, especially looking at the long run speed, 10th and 17th in the 2 practices, but starting 21st, I still think even his floor is 12th to 15th place car. So definitely looking at him this week because of, he's under 9K. He on both sites and gives you, even a 10th place finish gives you 11 place differential points, worth a little bit more obviously on DraftKings. He's someone I would consider in cash. Like if you're doing some cash lines, you can go Hamlin and Jones, or even Fitton and Elliott. Getting one of these, you can build a balanced lineup with some excellent place differential right here in the 8-9K range. So keep that in mind as well. So just looking at a question here. Bubba Wallace. Okay, I'm just going to bring him up here in just a second. Good old podcast silence. Yeah, let's go down. So he's 25th in my model, which isn't bad. Starting 27th. He was 11th and 17th in 10 lap averages. And if we go look at those, I usually take those 10 lap averages when you start getting in the 15th and down because not all the cars run. And, the speeds are different, especially when you start looking here. The big break is at De Benedetto, 173 mile an hour, 174.914 for Bowman, and then it jumps up 2 miles an hour to Tiff Buescher. So I kind of look at those speeds as well. Like Ryan Preece, seeing that he's 26 doesn't really mean much to me because he was 9 miles an hour in those 10 laps slower than Paul Menard. So start looking at the guys up here. So it is good to see he was right in the range with Newman and Hemrick, Austin Dillon. So, I think he's got potential this week to finish, 20th to 25th. Definitely, I think I would more resort to GPPs just because of maybe, the season he's been having. I do like Priest starting back a little bit further. You said FanDuel, I believe, so it's $1,000 more. But if you need that savings, definitely going down just 2 place differential spots to Wallace to get that extra $1,000. I think makes sense there as well. Priest didn't show speed at all. Like I said, he was last in those 10 lap averages. So Wallace actually had better speed. So, I'm actually leaning Wallace a little bit over Priest here at this moment. So definitely would go that way. Going to look at just see how he's done. He's got, I believe, 2 races here. 27th, started 25th last year. And then in 2017, he started 17th and finished 11th. So he showed almost top 10 upside. This was one of his best tracks in his rookie season. So definitely think he's a good value play. Definitely jump on board. I'm with you on that one. Keep getting stuck putting Menard in FanDuel since Newman starts at the back. Yeah, Menard starting 14th really scares me. Didn't have a 10-lap average in first practice. He was only 16th in that 1-lap speed. He was 16th again, so he kind of repeated that short run speed in the final practice. Didn't really gain anything there. He did make a 10-lap run, and he was 25th, which, like I said, was right near the bottom, just ahead of Priest. So that doesn't strike me as something I'm looking at. I have 0 shares of him. He's not in my player pool at the moment. I would almost rather take the risk, even though De Benedetto's been not, almost terrible here. I would take him at 23rd or even go down to Ty Dillon at 26th. Just I'm not liking Menard starting where he is this week at 14th. If he starts 20th to 25th, I'm on board. But 14th, I just don't think he's a top 20 car. Although he's had some success here. Just this season, the more the current form stuff is what I'm looking at. He was 11th here last year, 21st the year before, 18th, 15th, 15th, 30th, 12th, 24th. So that's how he's finished here. So I think that's more, starting 14th. I think that's more on his upside, more on the high end of things. And I don't think, I think he was racing better last year when he was with the Wood brothers in the 21 car when he finished 11th. Even when he was in the 27 car with Richard Childress, I think he was racing a little bit better. Like this season, it's just kind of been a disaster for him, which is tough because they're a satellite team of the 2 and the 22 and the 12. And, you've seen Logano and Kozlowski have success, but you've seen the 21 struggle. So, the team speed is definitely there. But just seeing those struggles, like he's only got 4 top 20s in the last 6, no top 10s at all. 2 top 10s all year and a 17 average finish. It would be more of a GPP play. If you're playing that on FanDuel, I would be underweight and using GPP only. So I'm going to look at some other drivers I maybe have not mentioned yet. Oh, one other thing I would like to show you, and if you want to get a copy of this, again, you can check it out on my Twitter. You can check it out on the Roller Pros chat. You can check it out on the DFSR chat. It's just for DraftKings now, and it's a work in progress, but definitely stay tuned. There's a lot more to come. It's pretty much showing all the drivers' salary, their starting position, and then what I've done is put together, if they finished first, second, third, all the way through to 36th, what DraftKings points they would get for finishing position, plus their place differential, because we do know their starting position. I had to update that because I got Newman at 23rd, but that will be updated here once the video is over. So what this is showing us is if Chase Elliott finishes first with his place differential points plus his finish position points, he's going to give you 65 DraftKings points. That doesn't include fast laps or laps led right now, so not really looking at the Dominator thing. I'm working on kind of a model for Dominator stuff later that I will add to this, but for now, this kind of gives you a really good look because fast laps, can't really tell. What I'm going to try and do is build a model around practice speeds so I can kind of predict this driver has a such and such chance of leading this many laps, blah, 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 and then I can add those points to this sheet as well, so you can really have a good look at what a driver has potential of, his ceiling at finishing at these ceiling and floor, finishing at these different positions. So, yeah, for instance, if Chase Elliott finishes, let's just go back and say Chase Elliott finishing 12th today on DraftKings is better than Kyle Busch finishing 7th. It is only slightly worse than Brad Keselowski finishing 2nd. This is provided, again, without laps led or fast laps. So it's just a good way to compare where you're getting value when making lineup decisions between a couple of drivers. And there will be a lot more added. If you have questions about this, definitely, after this video, hit me up in a private message in either of the chat rooms or on Twitter as well, and I can definitely help you out with this as well. Okay, so moving on. Any drivers I didn't talk about? Yeah, Buescher over Menard 100%. I do like Chris Buescher a lot this week. He has, let's just start out by just looking at how he's done here at this track, Kentucky, and then I'll get into the other reasons. So 37th in his first race, that was with Front Row Motorsports, 34. Then he moved up to the 37 with JTG Doherty in 2017, finished 16th after starting 22nd. And then last year he started 20th, finished 23rd. What I like this year, and it's kind of been, under the radar, I guess, when talking about the 2019 rules package, he's been very good on these tracks. Like, he's got the 15th best average finish of the 5 races. He's got 2 top 10s, and he's top 20s in every single race. So just having him starting, just give me a second here, 25th. So he's starting 25th. He has finished inside 20th, so he's picking up place differential. If you're comparing to how he's done on the 2019 rules package intermediates this year versus where he's starting, he's picking up positive place differential at every single race. He's top 10s at Kansas and Charlotte as well, so he's shown some upside. If he's finishing top 10s at these tracks, starting 25th at 7,300 on DraftKings, 6,500 on FanDuel, that's big time points. We're definitely going to want him. I think he's got more upside for sure than Menard. Menard's been a little bit better here. He's got a little bit longer of a track record. But Buescher's been better. Like Menard, I'm just going to look at him here. Yeah, he's got no top 10s on these tracks. 24th is his best. Outside the top 20 in 2. So Buescher is about 5 spots on average better over those 5 races. So I'm definitely looking at him. Usually not guys that are going to get, there's not fast laps. He led 10 laps at Kansas, so he got a few extra bonus points there, which helped his fantasy scoring. But neither of them are fast laps, laps-led dominator guys that I'm really worried about. I'm just looking at more how Buescher's performed better than Menard on these 2019 rules package intermediates this year, and plus he's plus 9 place differential points right in that same price range. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at Buescher over Menard. Hope that answers your question there. Any other questions, just definitely fire away. Any drivers that I haven't touched on, just jump right in. I'm going to go for another probably 5-10 minutes here, and then I'm going to go finish my lineups and look, just looking at what we got coming up. Looks like we got about 2.5 hours until we see the lineup lock and the race start. Good news, weather looks good. Last week was kind of a pain. Did the video, got ready, built the lineups, rain came, they delayed, they canceled the race. Then it went on, got delayed the next day, and then they ended up calling the race after it looked like it was going to go back to green. Kurt Busch got hurt, so he went down pit road thinking the race was going to go back. He was in, catbird seat. He was right there. Had the race win if he didn't go down pit road, but I don't think that's necessarily NASCAR's fault, because they do have, this is just my opinion on this anyway, I got some time here while I'm searching a few things. He had a choice. NASCAR does not know that lightning strike is going to hit in that 8-mile range. And as soon as that lightning strike hits, it's automatic that they shut the track down. This is a track thing. It's a Daytona International Speedway thing. Track shut down for 30 minutes from that lightning strike. If there's another one inside that 30-minute window, the clock starts over and they wait another 30 minutes. So I know it's easy to blame NASCAR because it looked like he screwed, and I definitely said, look at that, Kurt Busch got screwed. I don't think he necessarily got screwed over looking at it, at the 10,000-foot view once everything's over, and we're now a week ahead. So anyways, back to this week. Yeah, lineup lock, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, so that's 5:30 my time. We've got about 2.5 hours here to build our lineups. Going pretty heavy on both sides. I love the intermediate tracks. I definitely like the 2019 rules package. I love that we now have 5 races of data, and if you want to expand that even further with the full package, we've got 8 races if you include Pocono, Michigan, and Fontana in there as well. Auto Club Speedway, I still call it Fontana. Force of habit. Yeah, Chase is definitely a good play. Just the place differential alone makes him a good play. And then you add in that he is under 10K. He's the 6th most expensive on DraftKings. He's cheaper on FanDuel as well, 11K under some of these guys. So he makes a lot. It makes a lot of sense. He hasn't had a ton of success here lately. Gotten some trouble even this year. He's got the 3rd best average finish on these tracks. 2 top 5s, 3 top 10s. Hasn't finished worse than 13th. His last 2 races here at Kentucky, 13th last year. A little bit disappointing. 3rd the year before, and 31st in his first race in 2016. So he has shown his top 5 upside here. Like I said, I think his floor is probably around 8th to 10th. I think his upside is in victory lane, top 3, and definitely around that victory lane there. So first place. So definitely like Elliott. Is it okay to fade Martin Truex Jr.? That's tough. Like I said, he's led over the last 2 years. He's led all 3 stages in both races. So that just right there just absolutely tells me dominance. He's won back-to-back races here. He's been excellent on 1.5-mile tracks going back to the start of the 2017 season with 10 wins. I'm just going to have a look at that right over here. Actually, track type. So he's got 9 wins, 20 top 5s in 30 races on these tracks. Led a ton of laps, just behind Kevin Harvick when it comes to the laps led. And then the 2019 rules package, as you can see, he's averaging 64 DraftKings points per race and 70.8 FanDuel points per race. The only thing that really points you towards fading him is it didn't run a 10-lap average in either of those final 2 practices. So he's going to be relying on his team, but him and Cole Perner, I would say number one when you're looking at crew chief / driver combos in the series. So if anyone's going to make a change and be able to get up there and even have a shot possibly at leading some laps later in the race, second stage, even third stage, with some strategy to get some track position, I think they are one. But it's just ugly seeing that top 20 speeds. I think a lot of people might fade him just because the Kevin Harvick factor, the Keselowski factor, they're both cheaper than him. They both show better speed in practice. They've both also been good here. So I think he could be a GPP play. I don't think you're crazy to fade him by any means, but I'm not fading Truex, so I'm probably going to be a little bit underweight just because I am very heavy on Harvick, Keselowski, and then even looking at Elliott, Larson, Hamlin, Jones, those guys I talked about with place differential. That's more of a DraftKings thing, but still, overall, that's the way I'm looking at those drivers at the top. I think people will even see Kyle Busch as second in the 10-lap averages in final practice, and that he's been excellent here as well, winning twice. That I think it's going to come down to Truex being the lone man out. Truex and Logano even, I think, could be the lowest owned of these top five. Even you want to expand it further, even these top six drivers, Elliott and up. I think that's kind of the way it's going to shake out. So I think it's a good GPP play, definitely. And like I said, I do like the Toyotas this week as well. Not sure recovered. Truex slower in practice, but won the last two. Yeah, just went over that here. So like I said, I don't think you're crazy to do that, but there has been races in the past we've seen Truex where he hasn't practiced well. But like I said, they're an elite driver crew chief combo that can figure it out. I don't think they're going to get up front quickly, like definitely not in stage one. I think they could maybe get into the top 10 in stage one, but being they're starting on the same tires they had in qualifying, that kind of gives them a little bit of a disadvantage off the start. But as they start making adjustments, I think getting into the latter stages of stage two and even into stage three, I think just because of the crew chief driver combination, I think they can definitely get up front and have a chance to win the race late. I just don't think he's going to dominate. So if you're going to fade him, I would fade him on DraftKings more than FanDuel because I think he can still get that finishing position. But where you really want the dominator points, I don't think he's going to get you those on DraftKings. That's the way I'm going to look at it. So we'll say fade on DraftKings, play on FanDuel. Harvick, Brad, Almirola, Jones, Suarez line. Yeah, there's nothing I can say wrong there. Like I said, Suarez I like better on FanDuel. If he finishes top five, you're doing great at his price. If he leads some laps, that helps a ton as well. He's not going to hurt you if he finishes 10th. Jones, he's got the place differential upside. Almirola, he's starting on the front row as well. And those Fords, the Stewart-Haas cars, I think this may be the week that one of them breaks through and gets a win. Not necessarily Almirola, but the whole team looks fairly fast. So definitely like him to have that top five upside as well. Top 10, I'm on him on FanDuel only. I won't be using him on DraftKings. So I definitely like that lineup construction. Like I said, Harvick and Brad, I think, have the two best chances at being the dominators. So I really like your lineup construction there. Yeah, Logano, I mean, he's always a great play. Just he's cheaper than these guys. He's the series champion. He's somehow cheaper than these guys. And looking at the intermediate tracks from the 2019 rules package, he leads everyone. Sure, he's got a 17th and 15th at Texas and Kansas, but he won Vegas, second at Charlotte, third at Chicago. So 3 top fives in those 5 races. And the only concern really is he hasn't really been much of a dominator. But I don't think we're worried about that. He's priced down a little bit where we don't have to. In the race that he won, he's 32 fast laps, 86 laps led, but he didn't, as you can see, he hasn't led any laps outside of the 8 at Texas in those other 5 races. So I think that, again, helps keep his ownership down a little bit. I don't think he's going to be a dominator. Definitely like him a little bit more on FanDuel. He is expensive on FanDuel, second highest priced driver. I think he's going to be low, and because of that, because people are going to drop down 1,500 to Harvick. So I think for GPPs, Logano-Keselowski combination makes a lot of sense. Logano's going to help keep those Keselowski shares, the ownership down a little bit of your entire lineup, I think. Okay, go through a few more questions here that are coming in. Suarez will be able to keep the lead for enough laps to make him playable. Yeah, I went over that a little bit, Andrew. I will touch on it again here for you. I like him more on FanDuel because I personally don't think he's going to lead more than 20 laps. I think he's kind of in that 10 to 15 lap lead range off the start, and I think Harvick or Keselowski comes ahead and takes over. They've showed, I don't want to say faster cars in practice, but they're more experienced on this track. They've got out front. They've led laps at this track. They've led laps in this 2019 rules package. Suarez has led 13 laps in all 5 of those races. Actually, all 6. You want to include Atlanta in there. He's led 13 laps total in all of those. So I just don't see him as a dominator just jumping out and all of a sudden a driver that hasn't been a dominator ever before just jump out and lead a bunch of laps. I could see him staying out front early, kind of like we've seen with like Austin Dillon. It's kind of the same scenario. A little bit different just because it was Daytona, and even before that with Chicago and stuff like that. Just going to jump over here and quick have a look at that. How many he led. We want Austin. Yeah, so Dillon hasn't led the laps. So I kind of put them kind of in that same range. So I like Suarez a little more. I think he's a top 5 to 10 car for sure, which makes him a better FanDuel play because he's going to lose. You're going to be hurt more by the place differential negative on DraftKings than you are on FanDuel. I think he gets some fast laps in there as well. I mean, that helps a little bit on DraftKings, but overall, he's a FanDuel play for me, GPP only on DraftKings. If you're building a lineup based off of recent Kentucky data where, like I said, 3 times the winner has come from the pole and 5 times have come from the front row. So if you're building a GPP lineup on that narrative, definitely GPP for Suarez on DK. And I think you can use him, in all formats at 8,200 on FanDuel because I do think, like I said, he's a top 5, top 10 car. And he's going to, at 8,200, he's going to definitely make up that value. It is a lot of risk for the 41 on DraftKings. I'm not willing to go that route, but just looking at so many sheets open here now. This is on DraftKings, so he's starting first. So yeah, you can see the issue right away is if he finishes 10th, he's already down to 25 points. And you start looking at drivers around him. For William Byron, who's only $100 less at that same point range, he can finish all the way back in like 16th, 17th for Byron to have the same points as Suarez, who would finish 10th. So that's kind of one way I'm using this sheet to really look at situations just like that. Like if I'm predicting Suarez finishes 5th to 10th, he's going to be somewhere in here when looking at his place differential score on DraftKings plus his finished position. Depending on how many laps led he leads, he could lead 20, 30 laps early and still finish there. It's going to give you more points because he's going to get that bonus as well. But this is just an indicator to say, he doesn't lead. Take away those laps led and those dominator points. How do drivers side by side in the same price range level up to each other? Even looking at Chris Buescher, who's 300 less, starting 25th. Sorry, this will be updated after. For him in that 25 range, he can finish like 22nd, 23rd. So that, right there, that tells me that Buescher is a much better play than Suarez on DraftKings, unless you think magically Suarez gets out and leads 100 laps and he's the dominator of the race. There's probably a 2-3% chance that happens. Could definitely happen. We seen Justin Haley win a race last week, starting 27th before the wreck. He was in 27th place. He went to first, won the race, never passed a car from 27th to first. So anything can happen, but the odds are that Chris Buescher is going to be a better play on DraftKings than Suarez, and that's kind of the way I'm looking at it. That's kind of the way I'm building this fantasy point distribution sheet to be able to help you with those decisions when breaking down 2 drivers in the same price tier, because you can see the differences of where they finish. You can kind of compare and say, okay, like I just did, I think Eric Jones is a 15th place car this week. Gets 35 points. Now, Clint Bowyer right below him, if he finishes 15th because he's starting 7th, he's 14 points less. So kind of in the same price range. So anyways, that's the way I'm looking at it. Going back to the sheet, I'm going to look at some more, just kind of go over a few more questions here, make sure I got them all. Ryan Blaney, that is one driver I haven't talked about. That's one driver I was actually had in my head before I started the video that I didn't talk about in any articles this week, didn't talk about it in any chats, just kind of left him out. So let's go ahead and look at Blaney. So the last 2 races here, he's got a top 5, top 10 both times. So he finished runner-up last year. He was 10th with his last race with the Wood Brothers here. So that's good. We can check off the track history. and look at his current form, hasn't been great. 1 top 5, 3 top 10s. Hasn't led any laps. So he's not going to give you that dominator, which I'm not worried about at 8,300 on DraftKings. Season form, he's only got 5 top 5s, 7 top 10s. For a while there, he was either finishing top 5 or outside top 20. So definitely GPP only. I'm not going to use him in cash no matter what. He didn't show 10-lap averages, didn't run a 10-lap cycle in either of the practices, but he was 11th and 4th in those. In first practice, he picked it up and showed top 5 speed in final practice and started 15th. I'm definitely on board with Blaney and GPPs. He might come in a little bit under-owned. I'm not 100% sure. I don't really have a good feeling on that. I think maybe him starting 15th helps Almirola to an even lower ownership. But you've got Bowman, Blaney, Jimmy Johnson, Ryan Newman, all in that kind of range within $500-600 of each other on DraftKings. That's kind of a tough decision. I mean, on FanDuel, the big difference, as you can see here, of those drivers that I just mentioned, Almirola is quite a bit cheaper. Same with Jimmy. Blaney's up in that 10-4. But answer your question, yes, I think Blaney's a good play. I think he showed top 5. So I think he's got that top 5 upside, which he's shown, but he's also got big downside there as well. He hasn't been able to, consistently complete races. He'd probably rather, instead of seeing those few top 5s followed by 25th to 30th to 35th and crashing out, DNFs, that sort of thing, he'd probably like to see a consistent 8th to 11th place finish every single week. I mean, what driver wouldn't? I mean, being consistent like that. But for us in fantasy, he has shown us that big upside. If he was to manage to get up there and lead some laps, that would only be a bonus. But I think even without laps led, he's going to be a good play this week. And looking at him on the distribution chart here, starting 15th, yeah, win would give him big points, but even top 10 gives him 39 here. And you're looking at Almirola below him. Almirola needs at least a 3rd place finish to get in that range where Blaney needs a 10th. So, I mean, that's an easy decision if you're looking between those two drivers. Dylan, give me just a second here. Yeah, he started 9th. That is pretty much an auto fade for me. He didn't show top 15 speed, short run speed. He barely showed 15th place speed in the 10-lap averages. And then we go and look at him. We'll look at his season stuff. Only 1 top 10. So he hasn't finished better than that 9th place once. He finished 10th, which was good, very good for him at Chicago, which would have made him a better FanDuel play. Losing that one, I think I'd rather go a different direction. But then we're just going to look at him here at this track. He's got only 1 top 20 in his last 2 races. So his last races finishes here: 22nd, 19th, 16th, 25th, 16th, 24th. So he hasn't been great here. He hasn't been great at the 2019 rules package tracks, looking at the intermediates and stuff. So he's kind of a fade for me. Buescher, just especially on FanDuel, is a much greater play at $1,200 less, way more place differential. Didn't show, well, he showed top 10 speed in the first practice and 10-lap averages, but overall, I think his upside, he's going to give you more points per dollar than Austin Dillon, and even only for $100 more, I'm going to go that way on DraftKings as well. Talked about Paul Menard a little bit too. He's been pretty good here. I would probably even go that route on FanDuel. Just FanDuel is definitely an X for me. Maybe a deep GPP if you want to be really contrarian. Go with Austin Dillon on DraftKings. Thoughts on 7-time? Yeah, I definitely like Jimmy this week. He's coming in with back-to-back top 5s. I don't think he's got the win in him yet, but he's coming in with form. He's been decent here. I'm just going to bring him up. Yeah, hasn't been great here lately. Like I said, I think I went over this a little bit earlier. 14th, 40th, and 32nd in his last 3 races at Kentucky, but 9th, 10th, 9th, 6th, and 3rd in the 5 before that. So he's definitely showed his upside here at this track. He's coming in with good form, good confidence. He flashed some top 5 upside in practice. He's probably more likely a 5th to 10th place car, starting 13th at his price. I like him on both sites. I like Bowman, I think, a little bit more. He's a little more expensive, so it's going to be GPP only for Bowman. I would consider Jimmy. Obviously, I like Newman better just with the place differential, but Jimmy on FanDuel, I think, could be a cash play as well. You can build a pretty balanced lineup going that way. You know, him and Newman together, pretty much going the other way you'd like. So yes, I'm on board with Jimmy this week again. Bubba, Reagan, and LaJoy. I would just rate in that order: Bubba, Reagan, LaJoy. A link to the sheet with the finished position. Yes, 2 seconds here. I'm just going to share that. I should have did that earlier. Good thing you guys are on your toes. There is the point distribution sheet. And like I said, it's going to be updated. I'm going to be adding a FanDuel tab on here coming up. And then, like I said, I'm going to try and figure out a model where I can maybe project laps led, fastest laps, dominator points, so I can add that in here as well, so we can have a quick look at that. And then anything else that you think would help in breaking that down, definitely hit me up anytime, and I'll definitely consider we can have a talk for sure. Hemrick at 6 is the joke, right? Yep, definitely. Him and Austin Dillon have qualified so well. Their qualifying package this year with this new rules package has been unreal. The finishes, however, have not been there. So that, I mean, those are just easy auto fades, like the first guys I cross off my list when I'm really trying to narrow down my player pool. So that's really what I'm trying to do every week. It depends on how many lineups. If you're doing 150 lineups, you might use almost, you know, what do we got, 36 drivers? You might use 25 to 30 drivers in your player pool. But when you're only doing 5, 10 lineups, you got the 3 max, you got the 20 max on Draft. If you're doing 20 lineups on DraftKings, you really want to reduce your player pool so that, you know, you're building a core. Let's say we're using Harvick, Buescher, and Keselowski, or Harvick, Buescher, and Elliott. Use those 3 drivers. If you're making 20 lineups, use those 3 drivers in like 7, 8 lineups. Use those 3, swap in the other 3 drivers. Then switch that core up. You don't have to switch all 3 drivers up. If you're super high on Harvick this week and you think he's going to be 60% owned in GPPs, be overweight on him. Have 70% of them or 75% if you're high on him. So take Harvick, Keselowski, and Buescher, and then your second core after you've made 5 to 8 lineups is Harvick and 2 other drivers, and then swap in the other 3 5 to 8 times. Build your cores that way so that when your core goes off, like Harvick leads a bunch of laps, wins the race, Keselowski leads a few laps, finishes second, Buescher gets a bunch of place differential upside. When your core 3 hit, or core 4, however you're constructing your cores, you have more chances at hitting the nuts and winning a GPP because you're going to have more chances with your other 3 drivers. If you've only run that core once and that core finishes 1, 2, 3 or whatever, Buescher may not finish third, but if he finishes high and gets a lot of points, third in points per dollar fantasy value, and you've only run that lineup once and one of those other 3 drivers crashed, you ain't winning nothing. Whereas if you swap that in and out and you only had that crash driver in 1 or 2 of your 7 lineups with that core 3, you've got 4 or 5 other chances to hit the nuts with that core that went off. So that's how I go about building my GPP lineups, not just building a lineup and then making sure my next lineup is completely different and then my next lineup is completely different and so on and so on. I think that's bad roster construction. You need to get super, 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 super lucky. You might as well just buy a lottery ticket. Building lineups like that in those 20 max tournaments, 150 max tournaments, because there's no real correlation to your lineup construction and you're kind of behind the 8 ball, especially when you're talking when people are using optimizers. They're selecting their core and those optimizers are spitting out kind of just what I said. I like to build my lineups manually. A lot of people use optimizers to save time. I probably should because I'm literally run out of time in everything I do just because I cover so much for multiple sites. But I love doing it manually, and that's how you really have to go about doing it if you want to be successful playing GPPs. Cash games is a totally different story. NASCAR is a high variance sport. I don't play a ton of cash games, if any at all. I like it better on these kind of tracks where there is some dominators and there's a little more predictability to it. But when it comes to like your Daytonas and stuff like that, I want no part of the variance when it comes to cash games. I will play with the variance and use that to my advantage in GPPs. What else we got? I'm going to answer a couple more questions, then I'm going to get to these lineups because I've got about 50 to do. Got about 2 hours, so should be able to get done under the wire. I built a few. I wanted to wait. I built a few thinking that nothing major was going to happen in inspection, so thankfully that didn't. I don't have to go back and change those. But now that Newman's there, I'm really just jumping in and considering fading him for one, especially on FanDuel, just because the place differential isn't as big, and he's going to be, if you're playing cash games, he should be 80% owned. Definitely on DraftKings, probably on FanDuel well as with his price. But like I said, for GPPs, I like using that variance to my advantage and fading a guy, especially a guy who's, he's not an elite driver by any means. He's, what is he for the season? Let's just go look at his average finish. He has been very good. He's been like one of the top values in all of fantasy NASCAR lately. 11.5 average finish over the last 6 races, 14.1 average finish for the season. So at 15th, if he finishes 15th, that's plus 20 points on DraftKings. So, I mean, that's really good. But he's going to be 70% owned. So in some of my lineups, I'm going to take the chance and fade him a whole bunch. Like on FanDuel, if I fade him completely and he's 60% owned in GPP and he crashes trying to get up through the field early on or has trouble on pit road and falls 2-3 laps behind, ends up finishing like 30th or worse, I think I'm ahead of the field pivoting to, let's just look at the range here. I'm going to sort this by FanDuel here real quick and just give you who I'm going to be pivoting to in those situations. So I'd pivot a little bit to Menard, Buescher, Daniel Suarez, Almirola. There's enough of these drivers where I think they're going to be lower owned just because of Newman starting 35th. I think that just makes him auto chalk kind of thing. So 6K below on DK. That's tough. Probably Ty Dillon. Castle starting 33rd. I think he hasn't shown much speed. I'm not really looking at that 23rd because of the 10-lap averages. That there's only 26 drivers that ran 10-lap averages in final practice. Yeah, so I mean he didn't really show a bunch of speed. 169, so he was below that 170 mark. But starting 33rd, I'm willing to take a shot that he finishes 30th to 33rd, picks up a few place differential points there. One driver that did show, top 25, Corey LaJoie, but I don't like seeing these. I'd like him starting outside top 30. Same thing with Matt Tifft. I might take some shots with him. Not touching Houth, McLeod, and Curry. I'm not touching any of them, but I will, like I said, Castle, Tifft, LaJoie. Darryl, actually, Bubba would probably be number 1 for me, then Dillon, then Castle, Tifft, LaJoie. Chastain's kind of in there. They're all kind of grouped together. The ones that stand out, I guess, would be those top 3. Wallace. Priest is just outside that range. Let's sort by DraftKings here because that's what you said. So we got Chastain, Reagan, Bubba. So yeah, Bubba definitely number 1 for me in that range. And then Castle, Tifft, LaJoie. And they're after those top 2. It's pretty much just all jumbled together for me. I'm finding I don't need a lot of those lower end guys. 2 of them, getting exposure to 2 of them in my superstars and scrubs lineups. The rest I do like going balanced on DraftKings just because, like I said, you've got all this place differential upside from 9,700 down to Stenhouse at 7,800. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9 drivers in that group of 12 starting outside the top 10, and 4, 5, 6, 7 starting outside the top 15. So I just don't see that we really need to go down and get exposure to more than 2 of these punt plays. Yeah, Matt DiBenedetto, definitely. He looks okay. His track history is what really scares me off of him at this track. He since they went and redid it, he hasn't been great here at all. 42nd in 2015, 38th, 25th, 37th. So he's top 25 in 2017 was his best. So he started in 23rd, so he's never finished better than his starting position. He hasn't shown much better than that starting position speed. So altogether, he hasn't been great on the 2019 rules package stuff. We'll go look at that over here. Right near the bottom with a 29.8 average finish on those tracks. All that combination put together just takes me off him. I'd rather go McDowell, who's been about 7 spots better on average per race on these 5 tracks with the 2019 rules package, and he is just a little bit cheaper there as well. He does start 17th, so there's a little more risk there, so it's GPP only. But, I mean, if you're considering DiBenedetto, he's GPP only too, so I'll take the little bit of a discount. the better track record and the better record with this rule package. All right, that's going to wrap it up for me today. Thanks for joining me again. Another awesome show. Had over 50 people watching. Ended up with a ton of views last week. I appreciate it. I'm going to keep doing this for you guys, the same as there's people that want it. There's people reaching out before I started on literally Facebook, Twitter, DFSR chat, RotoPros chat, asking me when I'm going live. So next week, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a more concrete time. I think we're back to normal inspection next week. No waiting till race day like we had to today, no impound race type stuff. So I'm going to have a more concrete time of when the live video is going to be, and I will try and share that as early as possible so that you can all plan around it if that's if you're going to be joining me again next week. Thanks a lot. If you have any questions, like I said, jump in the DFSR chat, the RotoPros chat, hit me up on Twitter at Jaeger_Bombs9 or comment in the video below, and I will get to those. Let's go get some green screens. We've got 2 hours to build lineups. Let's get to work.